Okay, hi everybody. I'm gonna turn my camera on here, hopefully, and wave to you. Hi, I'm Mary Quest. I'm the content coordinator for Town Square and a senior instructor here at Erickson Institute. And I am here with Sarah Bucio from Wisconsin. She's a family child care professional who owns Explore More Learning. So Sarah's on screen.
Yeah. Yes, hi everybody. As Mary said, my name is Sarah Bucio. I live near Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I have a family child care center out of my home. We're on 7 acres, so lots of outside time here and lots of arts. So I'm excited to share with you kind of how I do things.
Great. So I'm going to turn the webcam off and pull the slides up here. I'm really excited about this topic. I've always been really passionate about the creative arts. I really feel that it's an essential way for any person, and particularly for children, to express themselves. And I think that too quickly we sort of lose touch with some of these ways of expression because we emphasize language so highly and it's so valued in school. And so I think as much as we can bring this in for young children and those areas that resonate with them, I think it gives them a real opportunity to share something special. So I'm excited to talk to you about incorporating the arts today. And Sarah has some really wonderful examples and ideas about how she does this with the children she works with. So hopefully she's just going to jump in and share some of those as we go along. I have this quote here from Laura Malaguzzi, who's the who was behind the Reggio Emilia schools in Italy, and I think this idea just really struck me. And I was at a workshop actually on Friday where one of the presentations was about creativity. And this idea that it should be a way of being and a way of thinking and a way of knowing. Particularly since we don't know what kinds of skills are really going to be essential in the future. There's so much changing at such a rapid pace that this idea of being able to think in really flexible ways and take risks and imagine all the possibilities is more important now than ever. So I thought we better begin by thinking about, well, what exactly is included when we talk about the arts. And I know we tend to focus a lot on visual arts, and you'll see a lot of examples of that because they're easy to share in a visual presentation. But just to keep sort of in our minds that it includes a lot of things. So there's things like drawing and painting, of course, music, movement and dance, dramatic play or theatrical kinds of productions, puppets. And I think if you start to think more broadly about the arts and the different ways that the range that can be included, I think it's really helpful and validating to children who one or the other kind of thing really resonates with them in a way. All right. So Sarah, when what do your kids really take to these days? Are they doing more visual arts stuff? Are they doing more dramatic players? Are kind of a lot of everything?
A lot of everything. We are play-based, so they are playing all day. They're constantly kind of in their own heads. So I would say that, you know, their whole day is art. You know, you talking about dramatic play and music and movement, that's what they're doing all day. I mean, they're moving all day, pretending with their friends. I have ages 3 months to 5 years old. So there's a big range in the type of play I am seeing, but it's all coming from them and they're all expressing themselves in ways that, you know, work best for them. So there's a lot of movement. Like I said, lately they've been really into oil pastels and watercolors. I've been doing a lot with that as far as where the visual arts go. Oil pastels is a big one for us right now.
That's great. One thing that I wanted to put out there kind of early on is this idea of arts versus crafts, because I see a lot of stuff a lot of, even on social media, stuff that pops up, and it's called an art activity. And actually, I would say it's more of a craft activity. And I think when you start to think about what's the goal of the activity, if the goal is truly around creative expression and about communicating some idea that's coming from you as the individual, then that helps kind of activity as an art or a craft. And I think this also applies in other areas, but again, visual arts creates a visual picture of the example. So I've got an example here. And I think you see three things going on here that have very different goals. And I went with rainbows because as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, I had this experience where one of the other teachers did a rainbow painting activity, and I did a rainbow painting activity, and we had very different kinds of results. And the children in the other class, everything, all their rainbows looked almost identical. You couldn't tell which child had made which rainbow. They were all perfectly the same, which to me just reflected a really different goal behind what the activity was about. And for me, it was more like what the middle one or even the right-hand one on the screen was about was more, what's your interpretation and way of expressing a rainbow, and exploring with color. And so I think this example came up in my mind as, you know, is it more open-ended and about expression, or is it about something else? Is it about following directions? Is it about matching the color to the color name, which is a really different kind of goal than creativity. Another way to think about this, was it child created? I see a lot of really interesting kinds of things like the ladybug on the left-hand side of the screen, but to me that isn't really creative expression, then you would look for the child to have more ownership and to put more into the work than the grown-ups. And then when we start to think about what are ways to look at what's appropriate with arts activities, I think the first thing that I think about, and that comes up in the research and the theories behind creative expression, is open-ended materials. And I think we can consider a range of open-endedness. And so sometimes that means that you don't have every option in the whole world available, which sometimes can also prompt creativity, but that ultimately there's multiple possibilities, that it's not just one thing that can be happening. And I know in a little bit we've got some, Sarah, I've got some images that you had sent, and something that I think about when we're considering a range of open-ended is sometimes you just give children black Sharpies, right? And there's a constraint in what they're allowed to do with that, but it's also open because they can make anything they want. And so sometimes that prompts creativity, but the idea that open-ended means you can do a lot of different things. It's a multiple possibilities included in that. Another thing that I think about that makes an activity within the arts really appropriate for young children is that they have access to it. And I think when you are an adult and you're inspired and you have this idea, it's really difficult to sort of put that on hold or put it on pause and come back to it outside of that moment where you're inspired. And I think particularly for children, they have ideas that are coming to them. And when you give them time and you give them access, and they can say, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to go get a piece of paper right now, or I'm going to go get the musical instruments right now because there's this tune in my head. I think that really validates that those ideas that they have coming to them really matter. And so, Sarah, do you have some ideas about accessibility of materials and how you think about that with the children you have in your care? Because you said you've got infants through school age or through kindergarten age?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the oldest, he's my son. He's going to be going to kindergarten, so he's 5.5. So yes, I have an infant all the way up to a 5.5-year-old. Who the 4 and 5-year-olds are very capable of, grabbing something off the shelf, making sure that it gets put back and that they're taking care of it, because we want to take care of our art supplies. So, but it's hard for the younger ones. We all know that toddlers sometimes have a different need for a marker, or, they just treat it differently. So, and then we have the littler ones who put everything in their mouth. So you have to really be thinking about where you're going to put things, but also so it is accessible to them when they need it. So I have everything in my playroom, but it's up on higher shelves. So if an older child can get a step stool and reach it, then they can use it. But that way it's kind of out of the way for the crawlers or the younger ones that might, put something in their mouth that they're not supposed to.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great idea and way to think about letting them still be self-sufficient when they're ready, without having those younger kids have to be constantly monitored or told no, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep.
This is a painting that my now almost 8-year-old son made back when he was probably 2 or 3. And I think this is such a great example of the process is the important part. There is a picture under there, and he sort of just kept going. And I think this idea that the process matters is very important in helping children explore to a degree where they understand what different materials can do. And I find this too, I mean, if I wish I had captured some video, but where children are exploring with sounds and what kinds of sounds different materials can make to make music, right? And so sometimes they want to take it all the way to the limit, like how loud can this get? I think this is what happened with this painting, that he had a painting that looked like it represented something, and he sort of just kept going, swirling the paint around until he got the brown blob, because that's what happens, right? And so to get to a point where you can make a painting with real intention, you have to mess around with it and see what happens when you do this and what happens when you do that. And I think it's allowing children space to test theories they have about what would happen if I did this. And so I think you have to kind of get a sense of what materials can do, what the boundaries are of the materials, and then in order to eventually do something that's really highly expressive and highly creative, which would push the boundaries of that. And so I think about the best poetry that people create really comes from an understanding of the mechanics of language and how you're supposed to use language, and then turning that around and pushing the boundaries and changing that in some way or manipulating that in some way to do something new and different. And so if you think about what children are doing in their arts activities as a process of trial and error, in order to understand the boundaries and what they're able to do with different kinds of materials, then it really becomes much more meaningful when they express themselves with intention and sort of push the boundary and change it and manipulate it in some way that's really highly creative. Thinking about what makes arts activities appropriate for young children in terms of how they can make their own choices. I think something that a child has ownership over in terms of their expression, they'd have to be able to have some ability to decide How do I want to play with this, or how do I want to use this material? And I think that validates for children that you can do things in a lot of different ways that are interesting and appropriate and correct, and that there could be multiple perspectives in how you would use the same kinds of things, and that they could go back to the same thing over and over and over again and do things in very different ways each time, and really open up an exploration. It sort of validates that you can make different choices that are all still right choices. Which doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries around how you explore with the arts, and I think we'll get to some examples of that a little bit later, but thinking about ways that you offer choice within those boundaries is important for children. And so since Erickson is a graduate school in child development, and that's my area that I teach in is human development, I wanted to be sure that we connect very intentionally how the arts and experiences in the arts are supportive of children's development. And of course, we're always concerned, are children developing cognitively? And I think in so many ways, when children have creative experiences where they're expressing themselves through the arts, that they're highly supported in their cognitive development. Divergent thinking, creative thinking is high-level thinking. And so if you think about what children are doing when they're creating something, they're really demonstrating an ability in symbolic thinking, symbolic understanding, which is exactly what language is about. It's what reading and writing is about. And so it's the same kind of process. Creating a representation or a symbol that communicates something is all about symbolic understanding. And then I think I chose this the legs would fall off. when the sculpture would dry, the legs would break off, fall off. And so there was a lot of trial and error in figuring out, how do we get the legs to stay stuck on the sculpture? We had to do some research and talk to somebody who understood very much how to use clay, had a lot of experience with using clay. And they showed her a technique for how to score the clay so that, and use a little bit of watered down clay to really kind of glue the legs in place. And then when it was fired in the kiln, then the legs did not fall off. And so I think this just is a nice example of this task of creating a representation and the kinds of ways that ties into cognitive development and learning processes at the same time as it's an exercise in creative expression. Physical development, I think you see happening across the arts, and obviously children are using both large and small motor skills when they're engaging in arts activities, whether it's visual arts or whether it's music and movement. And they're manipulating materials or manipulating tools, but at the same time, I think it creates another way in which children are using their body and developing sort of a kinesthetic knowledge, sort of a sense of themselves and what they can do with their hands, what they can do with their feet, and that these are also skills that are going to apply to other areas. So those fine motor skills, when a child is painting, or even when a child is painting even on a large canvas, and crossing their whole midline with their arm, that those translate to writing skills over time and more precise fine motor tuning. I think also spatial awareness. that children get when they engage in different arts activities. So I know my own children at home, when they're dancing, they frequently will coordinate with one another, and so it's a sense of themselves in space and also a sense of the other person in space, and trying to time and coordinate movements, which I think you can think about a variety of ways that applies in other ways in other settings, and how important those kinds of skills are. And then finally, with social and emotional development, I think it's really an essential component of social and emotional development to engage in arts experiences, that it allows for a lot of communication and expressing yourself in a variety of ways, and maybe for young children in a way that is more accessible than language and words are. And also an understanding of yourself as you're expressing yourself. So this is a drawing my younger son made of our family, which is just sort of gives a picture of the way he sees himself, the way he sees people that he cares about. And so I wanted to share that and think about what that can mean for children when they can make a representation of something that they care deeply about. And then another story that came to my mind as I was preparing for the webinar, I had a group of children who were creating a book. It must have been around Valentine's Day, and they were creating drawings of things that they love. And one of the little boys had lost his dad when he was about 3. He drew a picture, and it kind of just looked like a big blobby orange and yellow kind of abstract art kind of creation. And he was 4 at the time, and I said, "You want me to write your words down?" And he said, "Sure." And he said, "I love my dad," and I wrote it on the paper. And then they shared their drawings with the group, and he told the children, this is my picture, and it says, "I love my dad." And one of the kids said, "Well, that's not your dad. It doesn't look like your dad." And I had one of those moments where I thought, oh no, we're going to have to have a hard conversation, and this poor child, and how might he feel about this? And the child very calmly looked at the rest of the kids, and he said, "No, that's not my dad, that's God." And it was just this moment where I thought, wow, he made sense of something for himself in a way that he was able to kind of cope with what was going on in his 4 short years in his emotional life. That was really moving. And I think the fact that he was able to have a way to express that it was really important. I think it was important for the other children too. So that's where I see connections to all areas of development through the arts. And I think as far as like theory and research stuff, we've had enough. We've had enough of that. But I think what probably most of the listeners are really interested in hearing about is ways in which providers can best support these kinds of arts explorations. And so, Sarah, I'm going to let you kind of take the lead and talk about some of these ways that you provide arts experiences for children, and different ways that you kind of structure things to make it manageable for yourself, et cetera.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. All right, so I guess before I kind of get into the bullet points that you all can see, I'll just kind of briefly explain my setup. So, we're all family child care providers here. So we understand that our home sometimes, becomes the business as well. In my case, though, we live in a pretty small house. And as a family of 4, we didn't want our home to be also childcare, because for me, when 5:30 rolls around, sometimes I'm just done. I'm done looking at toys. I'm done looking at art supplies, and I just want to kind of be done for the day. For me, balance is really important. So my husband actually converted our garage into the outdoor play space. So, we eat and use the restroom in the house, but otherwise we're either in the playroom or we are outside. So our outdoor play space is their room. that's another reason why we decided to convert a different part of the property, because I wanted it to be their space. I wanted to limit how much I would say no. So when we're in the house, there's a lot of times me saying no, because again, that's kind of the family space. So the playroom is their space. I don't have to say no as much. I know all of you here with the mixed ages, you kind of totally understand what it is, how it is to manage a big array of ages and developmental stages. So our outdoor playroom is totally their room, but there's no plumbing. So when it comes to the arts, and specifically visual arts, and I guess even more specific, paint and finger paints, you think water, cleanup time. So for me, I've had to learn to really prepare and manage our visual arts exploration time. And I guess I should also note that I've lived here for about 1.5 years. My old center was in a different home, so it was set up a little bit differently. I had a space that had plumbing attached to it. My old center was in my basement, so I kind of had more access to more things because it was connected to the rest of the house. So I guess I'll go to the bullet points now that you can kind of picture. And the playroom is across the driveway, so I have to walk out of my house, cross the driveway, get to the playroom. So I take a lot of steps in my day, which I'm sure you all do as well. So providing materials. Actually, and I'm sorry, I'm going to back up and just talk about what it is for setting up for me. And I know I've said this a couple times already, but we can all relate that our days are kind of hectic. It's a little bit chaotic sometimes for me, and I've learned that's just the way it is. Kids are chaotic. That's just their nature, especially the younger they are, the more chaotic they tend to be at certain times. And that's just the way child development is. So, it's hectic and you do as much as you can to prepare. Sometimes I prepare an art activity ahead of time. I try and have it ready at drop off time at 7 in the morning. But to be totally honest, that's not always the way it goes. These days are long, the mornings come early. So for me, I've learned that for me to be ready when the children are ready to do art is to just have things available. I'm all about giving them options, and I'm all about not telling them what to do. So for me, I've learned to just have, like I said earlier, everything's in the playroom. We have pastels, we have paints, chalkboard wall, clay, slime. So there's an array of things that I have right in the playroom. I can grab when I need it. Like I said, the things that are appropriate for most ages, the kids always have access to. So like craft sticks, glass beads that won't fit. And I actually don't have any children that currently put lots of things in their mouth. So I don't really have to worry about that. But when it comes to more of the art supplies that coincide with the visual arts, I just have that all ready. So, when you follow the lead of a child, you're not always, you can't always say, okay, we're going to do an art activity at 9:30, because these children kind of, they have their own things in mind. So I try and just have things ready when it's appropriate. When somebody says, I want to draw. Okay, you want to draw? Give me a few seconds. Let's get our things together. Here we go. So that's kind of how I set things up. In regards to materials, choosing materials, I will say that when it comes to the paints, your colored pencils, your paintbrushes, your pastels, quality matters. I've gotten the cheap art sets at Michael's because they were on sale and because they were cheap, and you have to sharpen them every other time a child presses it down to the paper. So quality definitely matters. A variety. Mary touched on it before. A variety of open-ended materials. Not everything all at once. Maybe sometimes everything all at once. It just kind of depends on how the day is going, how things are happening. Sometimes for us, books will spark an interest. We had a really great book here a couple months ago called Faces, I believe. And it was just faces. It was each page was loose parts turned into faces. So after that, we grabbed all of our loose parts, set out a blanket on the ground, and we attempted to make faces. So sometimes a book will will get us going when in deciding what materials we are going to use. You know, like I had said before, we are outside a lot, so a lot of nature sparks our interest. So sometimes for the older children specifically, observational drawings. Grab that white piece of paper and a black Sharpie and ask them to draw the flower that's sitting on the table. But for me, and like Mary has said also, it's process over product. So it doesn't always have to, you can't expect things to turn out the way you think they're going to turn out. And another thing to remember going along with that is not everything you do has to go home. As a mom, I have 2 young children, and as a mom, I will admit that I don't want to keep all of my son's artwork or my daughter's artwork. I love what they do. I love watching them do art. I'll take pictures of them doing the art. I'll save a few here and there, but it's process over product. Because
yeah, and I'll jump in and just say sometimes you have a child that, you know, will sit and do drawing after drawing after drawing, and they have a stack of like 20 pages, right? Yes. And so sometimes I'll say, why don't you pick your 2 favorite ones or your 2 best ones that you want to take home? And yes, photos are great for sort of capturing, right? How did this evolve into 25 pages? I can tell you as a parent that I definitely appreciate not getting every single little scrap for home.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yes. So and I guess to kind of go off of that too, I know parents appreciate getting the artwork, but I think that also they appreciate, you know, not getting all of it.
And I'm looking at this picture, and it makes me wonder, so when you're looking at things like these beautiful little jewels or these trays, like what kind of process do you go through when you're deciding, do I need this for my program, or how do you figure out what kinds of things to bring in for the children to explore in creative ways?
Yes. Yeah, sometimes it is me. Like, I remember this was last summer. I remember on this day, I just found those trays at a thrift store and the beads at a dollar store. I've discovered like Dollar Trees, dollar stores are perfect for like the collaging things or for loose parts, because you can get an abundance of loose parts, like all those little glass beads. Really affordable. I've had them for a really long time. So I think on this specific day, I was really excited about it, and it was a really nice day, and we're outside a lot, and I like the ideas of mirrors and reflections. So for me, this came from me. I just put it out as a provocation just to kind of see what would happen. So sometimes it's me saying, oh, look at this new stuff that we got, because they're usually interested in, they're usually interested in what the other children are interested in, or if I'm excited about it, usually they'll get excited about it. So like I said, sometimes it comes from me, and then other times, kind of like what you were talking about before, Mary, if somebody just has an idea, then I do my best to try and make the space manageable for the people that are ready to make something visual at the moment.
The stuff in the image here, there's a book called Beautiful Stuff.
Oh, okay.
And I think it focuses on loose parts, but it's this whole idea that there's these things are they're sort of beautiful, right? And everyone can see that there's potential for creating something beautiful with it. But I think it's nice too that you can see with the trays and the glass beads that you have limited the number of items so that they really are figuring out, well, what can we do with this? Yes. Without it being so much that it's like a hodgepodge, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. And I know, as the adult in the day, which most of you here know that feeling, it is overwhelming. I mean, loose parts in art and paint sometimes is really overwhelming. So, and I think as, we are the caretakers, the providers, but we're also members in this all of our little learning communities. So, there's a sense of like self-care and selfishness. I think sometimes it has to come into play because for me, if I'm overwhelmed, then the children feel it and we're all overwhelmed. So there's a balance of trying to decide, is this a good time to bring everything out, or should we just hang out on the grass and bring out a few things and relax a little bit? So there's a lot that goes into it. But for me, I'm always about open-ended materials, and again, offering them options and not telling them, what I expect. I don't really have high expectations. I don't expect anything other than that they're enjoying themselves and that they are using their hands. And, I have kids here that generally end up painting their faces and painting their arms and painting their legs. And I'm okay with that. And they go home usually dirty and covered in paint. And I have been blessed with really great families that they all kind of just feel the way I do. And, they're using their brains, they're using their bodies, they're busy. And just because I don't understand it fully doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to do it. So I guess there was oh, sorry, go ahead.
I switched to this slide because there's the picture with the paint hands. It's messy.
It is, and it does get messy. And when I haven't been doing this all that long. I've been an educator for maybe 6 or 7 years. I've been doing this for about 4 on my own as a childcare provider. And you kind of learn as you go, just to kind of let it go, let it be, because children, they know what they want. And I think that they know what they need more than we know what they need. I've learned to switch my role as a teacher, so to speak, as more of a, I'm here to make sure you're safe. I'm here to make sure that you have what you need. I'm here to make sure that, you can resolve this conflict with your peer. But I'm not here to, like you showed the ladybug before, or the rainbow. Like, I'm not here to tell you to create or tell you to be a certain way. And that's kind of what I'm learning. And I think there was a part before you talked about Mary, you and I talked about things I should touch on. And one of them was managing the mess, because it is messy. And like I said before, sometimes it is overwhelming and it can be stressful. But there's 2 things that I kind of always say to myself, and I say to other providers or other parents, and they come and they're like, how do you do this? How do you deal with this? And there's 2 things I always kind of think about, and that's expect the mess. If you go into it knowing that this is going to be messy, we have toddlers. My 5.5-year-old, he's not a toddler, but he's messy and still, and he's crazy, and that's just who he is right now. He likes to learn with his whole body is the way I see it. And he's just like, he makes probably the biggest mess of them all, and he's the oldest. But if you learn to expect the mess, expect that it's going to happen, expect that there's going to be a cleanup time, expect that the kids are going to go home with paint on them, tell the parents, this is what we do. We let them explore with their bodies, blah, 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 blah. Expect it. If they know what to expect, then it's not that big of a deal. It's not that much of a shocker, I guess. And the other part of that is accept the mess. Expect that it's going to happen, and then just accept it. Let it go. Let it be. Buy the paint that comes, tempera paints. It washes out of clothes. Give them a space where if they do draw on the walls, oopsies, we'll talk about that, but it's not a big deal because we're all learning. We're all kind of going through this together. So again, expect the mess and accept the mess are 2 things that I just kind of, when they say, I want to paint, okay, here we go. It's going to be messy. And that's okay, because that's who they are.
It can be hard when it's in your home too. And I think there's some providers that don't have an entirely separate space. It could be just, this is going to be the room.
Right.
The mess.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is the table that I don't care if it gets on it. Right. Or the tablecloth that always stays. Right.
Right. Well, and now, that I don't know where everyone's located who's listening in, but in Wisconsin, it's finally getting warm and sunny and not wet outside. So you can do a lot of it outside. And that eliminates kind of a lot of that stress factor that comes with the mess.
Yeah. Well, and kids are inspired in different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, I guess, to go along with the mess factor and how to manage everything is, get the older ones to help clean up, clean up time. I say to the children I care for all the time, if you are choosing to express yourselves in these ways, then you have to help me clean up the area because, we all use it. So, and in my experience, they love to help. They're helpers by nature. They want to help you. So you give them a spray bottle and a towel, and they're busy for a long time. So just accept it, expect it, and then as a team, as a group, we'll just kind of manage it together. And I'm really big on loose parts also. So that's not messy in terms of having to wash their hands and get the paint off the table, but that's messy in the terms of having to put it all away at the end of the day. So again, managing the materials with how you think the group's gonna deal with cleanup time. And cleanup time, that's a whole nother learning opportunity. Everything from start to finish, 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., all those little transitions. I mean, yes, they're exhausting, but those are learning opportunities as well.
Think about putting away materials and just the idea that you're learning how to categorize, right? You're putting these things in this container and this goes in this container, and I think then also the value when you have your arts materials and you have to care for them because you enjoy using them, and so it places a value on the materials then as well.
Yes, exactly.
For the children.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. I mean, the pastels we use, because for me, there's quality in some of the things, the paint, the colored pencils, the markers, pastels, things like that. Like I just know from experience that there's no buying the cheap things if you wanted them to last. So yeah, we do talk a lot about you can't push as hard as you want with a marker because the tip's going to go into the marker, or put the caps back on. So yes, I mean, it's all a part of the process, but giving them access to it, how are they going to learn? How are they going to know if we don't let them try? So again, I think a lot of it comes down to just expecting it and understanding child development and kind of where they're at that certain time in their life. And I'm just looking at my notes to see if there's anything else that we kind of, open-ended questions too, as they're painting. Like I said before, I don't ever have a certain expectation in mind, other than letting them explore, hence my center's name, Explore More Learning. I'm just big on options. I want them to have a variety of materials explored in a variety of ways. Certain examples, I guess, of open-ended questions, rather than just saying, oh, I see you use blue, or wow, that's really beautiful, while they're working to make them think deeper, tell me what you're making. And then Mary, you had talked about before, writing it down. Sometimes there's a whole story that goes along with something and we can't see that. I can't really picture the story just by looking at what you visually made, but if you tell me, I'll write it on the back. And then that also is a whole nother connection for when they go home to mom and dad. It kind of bridges that gap between school and home, or daycare and home, because sometimes things get lost at pickup and drop off. And, if we can just jot down a few sentences, I think it makes a big difference when the child goes home and, what did you do today? It kind of helps with that connection at the end of the day. Another question, when they're creating, what made you think to do that? What are you thinking about right now? Why are you choosing these colors? Things like that. So, and it's nice to observe as well, kind of, I call it sports casting, saying what they're doing. That helps with language as well. I know for my toddlers, we're very play-based, and I kind of am big on letting them be who they are, but I also know that, there's an expectation when it comes to academic things. So with my toddlers, I see you're using the red marker, or I see you're using red. So I'll try and throw in my language as a way of helping them also learn their colors and, count and things like that.
Yeah, and I think the questions and the observation that you can do gives you sort of a way to what is that they're thinking, and also what are the next steps that we can take to kind of continue pursuing this idea or this line of thinking or inquiry. And so part of that idea that you're following their lead because you're following along.
Right. Right. And then also with that, it's, you know, these young children tend to, you know, it's much easier to go along with them than try and get them to do something that they don't want to do or that they're not going to do because it just doesn't make sense. You know, it doesn't make sense to them. It doesn't make sense to go along with it because, you know, these are strong-willed children, and it just makes everybody's life a little bit, you know, more cohesive and less chaotic if you can just kind of follow their lead and see where they go with it, because you can still tie in the academics if you need to, and you can still bring that together by following their lead. And I guess one last thing I wanted to just mention before we have to get to questions, you know, as providers and, you know, human beings in general, we do the best with what we have. And I think that these children that I care for, that I see day in and day out, have really taught me that. Because I know many of you here can relate, income and funds, you know, how much we can spend on art materials and how much we can spend on this or that is something to consider. And while we want quality, sometimes that's not in the budget. So I've learned really wonderfully and beautifully over the past couple of years that, you know, as adults, but also the children, you know, we do the best with what we have. And you all know, you give a child a cardboard box that didn't cost anything, the mailman just brought it, and they can make something really beautiful out of it. So I don't think it has to be expensive. It doesn't have to, you know, break the bank for them to be able to explore and be artists and just be creative. You know, I saw a rope and a brick the other day become what could have been a potentially dangerous fishing pole, but, you know, it was this whole idea of, it came from them. And it's just, you know, you work with what you have, and you do the best with what you know, we do the best that we can. And we can have all these wonderful ideas, but I think that there's a lot to be said for what you have. And you probably do have a lot of stuff already that can be turn into a really great experience for everybody. So that's all I have as far as my notes here. So I guess if it's time for questions, I don't know how we doing on time.
The one other thing I just wanted to, and I know you mentioned this before, but this idea of following the child's lead and doing this in a balanced way, that it's not just whatever a child asks you say yes to, but you have boundaries. You have within reason, right? You do the best you can with what you got, but that you're validating that what the child's interested in is something that's worth considering. I think that's, you know, it doesn't mean everything is a yes.
No,
I think that
yes.
feels,
Exactly, yeah, there's a balance to it for sure. But like you said before, it's kind of helping them follow through with, you know, whatever they're thinking creatively. If I can, I will. But yeah, sometimes it's not manageable. Sometimes it's not a good time in the day to get out the art supplies, or sometimes it's right before mom and dad are going to be here. So yeah, there's certain times where yes, you do have to say no.
Sure. And I think as long as you're listening and telling children, okay, or maybe it's a not yet, maybe it's not right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I do want to make sure that there's some time for questions. But the one last thing I just want to point out is you're talking about, you know, you do the best with what you've got and you don't have to spend a lot of money. So many of your images show using nature and natural materials, like using the flowers or different grasses as paintbrushes, which just, you know, obviously that didn't cost you any extra money, but allowed the children to try something in a really different way, which I think is so interesting.
Yes.
And that are exploring with all the materials and with the nature in really different kinds of ways that just opens up a whole new way of thinking, I think.
Right. And the other thing too, looking at these images, a good material that I will, like I said, I've said it a bunch of times already, quality is important with certain things. And for me, I've learned that the liquid watercolors are much better than the, like the Crayola ones that are flat squares that you just kind of wet the brush with. I would invest in liquid watercolors because those, in that case, a little goes a long way and they're much more vibrant. And the colors are a lot brighter for the children. So I guess just a little tip there from my perspective, liquid watercolors is a good something to invest in.
Yeah, I've used those. They're very nice.
Yes.
Yeah. The color quality is just a lot better.
Yeah. And you only need like a drop or two and it lasts for a long time. So yeah.
A little goes a long way. So Nicole, are there questions that we should try to answer here at the end?
Yeah, we have a few. And if anyone wants to send in questions now would be the best time to go. We have a lot of great comments that were being sent in, so I'll kind of have to sift through those. So sorry if we don't get to read your comment, but some of the questions that are coming in are, how do you allow infants to explore art, and what are some ideas for them to be able to do creative art?
For me, I guess in the past, I do a lot of finger painting and, whole body painting with the little ones, but they have to be able to sit up and, kind of, if they can sit up and move their limbs, and you can plop them down on a piece of paper and put some, a blob of paint in front of them. But in my experience, they have to be able to, like I said, sit up and kind of manage their bodies a little bit that way. But, thinking of what Mary said, as far as it doesn't have to be visual, the little ones, anything, music, even just having another child, maybe if it's not too loud, if they seem interested in it, kind of, that's what's great about the mixed ages, is you can have the older children, maybe shake a maraca for the child, or I guess it depends developmentally where the child is. If they can hold things, little things they can shake that'll make noise. But for me, if a child can sit up and kind of move around a little bit, then I do allow them to paint. But I make sure I'm right there, because that they're gonna eat most of it or try and put that all in their mouth. So the younger they are, the more supervision. But for me, painting is a big one for the really young ones.
I have a picture, and I wish I had thought to put it in here, but when my son was in a high chair, he probably 5-6 months old. I just covered the high chair tray with paper, taped it all around, and I just gave him some squirts of paint, and he just did right in the high chair. Paper off the high chair, and when we were done, and it was like he had this little experience, and it was great to watch him look at the paint and then look at his hands, and just you could see on his face this dawning realization that he had done that, which was just a really nice little moment as a parent.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then I don't know if this was an answer to the question or an offering of that question, but Karen suggested, she said that she bought a clear umbrella and had the children paint while another child stands under the umbrella outside. So
that's a good idea. Yeah, that'd be fun for them. That'd be fun for really, really young ones that are just still laying on their back, looking around at everybody. Yeah.
Neat. Okay.
Sorry, we're still sifting through everything. Okay, I don't know if you might have briefly touched on this, but we can maybe come back to it a little bit or ignore it if you guys want. So this question is saying, parents seem to not understand this type of structured time with their children. Is that what you find as well?
For me, I do my best to communicate with parents as to why we're doing what we're doing. I have a business Facebook page that I post a lot of articles to, and research-based articles. So I am constantly communicating with parents, as to why we are doing what we are doing. So I do my best to take the research that is out there and take the knowledge that I have and the experience that I have and the education that I have and lay it out for the parents, whether it's email, talking, Facebook, however I can get my point across. But I'm pretty straightforward with parents when they meet me. If somebody is interested in my program, I tell them right away kind of why we do what we do and what our days look like, so that when they do pick up and they ask what their child did, and I tell them this or that, or the child says I did this or I did that, there's really no surprises because they kind of know what to expect when they meet me for the first time.
Well, and you're going to, I think, get emailed a research to practice statement that has a lot of the information for the presentation, but just also connections to why the arts are important. And I think something Sarah does, which you can see in a lot of these images, is she's really thoughtful about documenting the experiences of the children. And I imagine if you're sharing that with a parent and you say, well, look, this is supporting their problem solving because they had this happen and then they tried this, or they're really practicing with their fine motor skills, which is going to help them develop into a great writer. If you have those little connections for parents, like Sarah is saying, I think it can help them to sort of see why it's important that you include those things. And I think the other message is just look at how happy your child is with what they did today.
Right, exactly.
And look at how good they feel about what they do.
Right.
And when they see images, I know for myself as a parent, when I see images of my own kids in their learning settings, and that they got something important to them out of that experience. You can see it on their face in the picture. That's really meaningful.
I'd like to add too, the focus and the attention spans. I think, it's a healthy attention span is something to consider when we're, with these children. And you can see in images when working in the arts just how focused they are. They're sitting still. They are, you can see in the little boy in the photo there with the green tank top, he doesn't have to be talking. You don't have to know what he's painting to know that he's thinking, A, B, he's focused, and C, he's, there's intention there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. The next two questions I think are referring to the pictures on your slide up right now. So I'm going to lump them together. So one is referring to the paint palettes, the wood cookies. And so the first question is, did you varnish them? And then the second one that's kind of going along with the pictures again is, how do the leaves stick to the paper? Were you giving them glue?
We do not varnish our wood cookies. My husband cuts them for me, and over time they usually end up in the yard or wherever. So over time we just kind of keep cutting them, but no, we do not varnish them. And then this for me was more of a process over product experience, because I really liked how the flowers looked when it was done and over with, but I did not have anything to actually make it stick. So at the time I had wished I would have thought about that, using a little bit of glue, but this was just process over product. I attempted to send it home, but I know that the flowers got lost. So they got the painting, and I took a lot of photos, so they got to kind of see what it looked like with the flower on it. But that flower at that moment is just sticking there because of the paint. It never actually went home that way.
Okay, I think that's all the questions that came in or that I'm seeing.
Great.
But if there's anything that we missed, you can feel free to email it to me, or I can make sure that it gets to Mary and Sarah, and we can get it answered for you if there's anything else, if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah. Great. And I thank you so much for being here and joining us. And thanks to NAFCC for partnering with us and inviting us to do this. And if you have not been to Town Square yet, I would encourage you to check it out. You'll get a copy, I think, right, Nicole, of the research to practice statement on the benefits of incorporating the arts.
Yeah, we'll make sure that gets sent out with the recording later this week.
Great. And then there's other research to practice statements. There's professional development. There's tons of resources that are all family childcare focused. It's free. Everything on the site is free and accessible. And if you have a chance, and hopefully, Sarah, this is okay, if they look at your Facebook page to get some ideas, because you have such great ideas, and I think the way you communicate that to your families is a really beautiful example of kind of bridging that for parents to understand why it's important as well.
Yes, please do. Yeah, a lot of my advocating and communicating is through the business page. But yeah, it's Explore More Learning Center, and we're in Wisconsin. So you just search for us. Yep, we're in near Green Bay. So hopefully you can find us if you search the name.
Great, thanks.
Great, thank you guys again for presenting. We'll make sure that the recording and all of these resources, the slides and the research to practice statements get sent out to everyone who attended tonight. Again, if you have any questions or have trouble finding your attendance certificate, for those of you watching the live webinar, contact us and we'll get you taken care of. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great night.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Sarah.
Yep, thanks. Bye.
Bye.